And the root cause of the problem is that the United States is not the most powerful country in the world. Is the game plan Mr. Trump often engages in. He's hot, he's cold. One day he loves you, one day he hates you. He's trying to say to Russia and India, China's bad, they're evil. I don't think that Mr. Modi or Mr. Putin are going to buy that argument.
If only pictures could speak. This is a picture that has reshaped how America looks at India and the world right now in terms of a changing world order. The SCO Summit has rattled Washington, D.C., and Donald Trump, in his social media post, spoke about or wrote about that very same SCO Summit where Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi were seen together talking, discussing, engaging. To discuss how this entire SCO Summit impacts America and how America's reactions impact the world is America's foreign policy unraveling. To discuss all this and more, I'm being joined by Rick Sanchez, a veteran American journalist, has traveled the world, has interviewed many people and is now based out of Russia. Thank you so much for joining us over here, Rick. Let me begin with this very important event, that's the SCO Summit. But what do you think of the reaction that's coming in from Washington, D.C.? We'll discuss that first and then talk about the SCO Summit. Donald Trump has tweeted, and it's quite telling. He actually is quite unhappy, saying that the Russian leadership and the Indian leadership are moving to this dark China.
Well, it's not surprising. In fact, this is the game plan Mr. Trump often engages in. He's hot, he's cold. One day he loves you, one day he hates you. He is finding ways, though, to make people react in two ways, I think, around the world. Number one is confusion. And if you're a real businessman or woman, you would know that the last thing you ever want to do to a market is confuse it. There has to be consistency of messaging. And the messaging that's coming out of these days from the United States is so incredibly confusing that it leaves people wondering whether they should act on it or just ignore it. And what most people are choosing to do is usually ignore it from a business standpoint. From a geopolitical standpoint, what that causes is for people to look to other places. And that's what we saw happening with the Shanghai summit. By the way, I should mention the other thing that obviously with Mr. Trump's messaging that happens is, countries are like people. We all have feelings, right? And when you feel insulted, you don't exactly want to pick up the phone and call that person. Maybe that's why Mr. Modi reportedly ignored 4 of Mr. Trump's phone calls, because other suitors are now saying to Mr. Modi, look, don't feel bad that the United States doesn't want to be your friend. We'll be your friend. China's literally saying to India, if you could look at things, from on the world stage this way, like, look, we'll be your friend. We'll be your business partners. We'll buy your products. We'll share rare earth minerals with you. We'll exchange flights. We'll solve the problem in the Himalayan border. Let's just get together and we'll do for each other what you were hoping the United States would do for you that you no longer trust the United States will do. It's almost as simple as that, isn't it, Geeta?
Right. Rick, absolutely he's rattled. The countries are coming together, but how close are they going to come? We do know that Russia and India share unmatched relationships, almost enviable. But when it comes to India and China, it becomes a little different. Having said that, let's first focus on the double speak of Washington, D.C. here, Rick. Let's talk about what we're looking at when it comes to Donald Trump and the fact that it's okay for President Donald Trump to go and meet President Putin. It's also okay for DC to engage Beijing for trade talks. And they probably could be concluding a trade deal, maybe even before an Indo-US trade deal. And it's also okay for President Trump then to invite President Xi Jinping for a summit-level meeting. But it's not okay for Modi to be meeting the very same leaders. Double speak. isn't it?
It's almost funny, isn't it? I can do it, but you can't do it. It makes absolutely no sense. I think you mentioned at the beginning when you were introducing the topic, you mentioned the word jealousy, and it almost comes across that way. I think for Mr. Trump, things are often very personal, and he thinks that only he should be able to have these types of relationships, and only he should be able to choose where those relationships go. But can I share something with you from a personal standpoint? I was thinking about
Absolutely.
yesterday. I was on a plane yesterday on Aeroflot, no less, a Russian airline coming back from Beijing to Moscow, and I started thinking about this. What a shame that the United States is self-isolating. Think about that word, self-isolating. Here is arguably one of the greatest countries in the world in so many ways. Great people, great system, a great constitution, and some great leaders in the past, and still some great leaders. And as a result of that, the world, including your country, have for many years wanted to be close to the United States. They
Oh,
reached out.
yes.
We want to be a part of your world. We want to be a part of it. So did Russia. So what I saw, and when I was in China, I saw the same thing. China has tried to embrace the United States in so many ways. And Russia, by far, tried to embrace the United States in so many ways. Just go to Moscow. You hear Russian music in the malls. You see children are taught English in the schools. A lot of things that they do here in Russia to embrace the United States. And but now, because of the self-isolation, because of the way the United States, through the Biden years and now through the Trump years, has kicked in the teeth the Russians and now the Indians and obviously the Chinese with the tariffs, those countries are saying, you know what? On Aeroflot Airlines, we used to play American movies. No more. I was like angry because as an American citizen, I wanted to watch an American movie. There was not a lot of
Mhm.
American movies. There was not a lot anything on the menu that was American. You go to stores and you're not seeing American products.
Right.
There's this thing happening in the world. Sure, you and I are paid to figure it out from a large geopolitical macro level, how countries behave, but it goes beyond countries. It goes to culture, and it goes to the fact that people in these parts of the world are now going to look to each other. People in India will now fly on vacation to go to different parts of China that they maybe wouldn't
Right.
have in the
Well,
past.
people now will start looking at China, Rick, and I'm saying this because every time there have been problems between India and China, and I say China is still important, I'd get brickbats. I'd be told that I'm anti-national. Oh, you don't know the real world, and I'd keep saying, look, wait and watch. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You certainly can't put it in the American basket. But can I tell you one thing? I'm going to steal your line and title this interview America's Self-Isolation. What a way of putting things, how America's policy is actually unraveling. Now, let me ask you, is Trump's America's foreign policy or America's foreign policy now unraveling because of Trump?
Yeah, of course. And what's worse is some of the things that we were just talking about. And by the way, you're right. And I've spoken to a lot of my Indian colleagues who have told me the same thing. And don't count your chickens before they're hatched. The China-India relationship is better, but there's still some hurdles to overcome. And I understand that. And there's going to be hurdles to overcome in many different geopolitical spheres and relationships. But this is the door is being opened. Whether either side walks in is another question, but the door is being opened, and the person who's holding the door open is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is literally telling Russia, we don't want to be your friends. Go be friends with China. You want a friend? Go talk to China. He's telling Modi, you want a friend? Go talk to Xi. I mean, it's remarkable to me that they don't understand. If you just measure the metrics, the GDP growth, standing armies, population size, I could go on and on and on. The list is vast. if you do this measurement, and if you look at these metrics, what you find out is these countries that are coming together at this summit that I was covering for the last 5 or 6 days and have just returned from are potentially by coming together much more powerful than the G7 is, and much more powerful than any union of Western countries, including Washington. And if Mr. Trump, or worse, the people who are in Mr. Trump's ear, the military contractors and the people who make money from aggression, who love when we're in an aggressive stance with any of these countries, don't see that, they're either stupid or they're simply cynical and don't want to see it because they fear that if Mr. Trump finds out about that, he might not be as aggressive, and all those people are not going to be able to make money off of the Ukraines of the world and other conflicts that we've engaged in simply because we wanted to make money and not because they did anything at all for the people of the United States. In fact, I would argue that any of these conflicts that we've been in for the past 20 years have done nothing but lessen the condition of the American public. And I can say the same thing for the British and the French and the Germans.
Rick, the photographs that were sprayed across various networks across the world were clearly calibrated. They were calculated. The leaders knew what they were doing. They wanted to be seen together, having a conversation, engaging, but having Russia in the room for India is essential. It began in Kazan after the Galwan clashes between India and China. The thaw really began with Putin looking at Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi and bringing them together. There was a conversation, kind of a thought that began there, and it now has culminated or moved forward in Tianjin in China. But do you think this grouping can really deliver when you have Chinese forces sitting on Indian territory? Well, that's always the question.
Yeah, no, and I understand. And it's a very sensitive point. But look, you obviously know more about this than I do because this is a conflict that you have covered for many, many years. And the only point that I would make, and I think it's an important point, is right now, as I see it, India seems to have a bigger conflict with the United States than it does with China. I mean, at the present time. And I also can say this with full confidence. It seems to me that all the signs and all the signals that are coming out between China and India right now are very positive. So sometimes you have to look at things not based on where they've been, but where they are right now. And given this scenario right now, we're looking at a situation where these two countries are coming together, perhaps like, maybe they haven't in a long time. And what that leads to is the potential that they're going to be able to get along, or at least, the handshake could turn into an embrace.
I'll zoom out and go to Russia and Ukraine. But before that, just one more question, Rick. You see how, and you know that there is potential there, but you see SCO versus BRICS, where you do not have Pakistan, and then there is SCO where you have Pakistan, and everything really falls apart. For India, that is important to not have maybe Pakistan in the room. And if India is not there to fight the real fight with Russia and China, then there's no use at all. So when you want these three countries to come together, the Pakistan factor always remains. And for China, Pakistan is a non-negotiable.
They were there at the SCO, and I don't know. Did you notice? I tried to pay attention to it. I didn't notice what the body language was between the two leaders, Modi and the leader of Pakistan.
Well, nothing. They did not even look at each other, because you can't have a terror state or a terror attack from a state that sponsors terrorism and then go and shake hands or smile at that very same leader from that country. You lose votes in India. I mean, Prime Minister Modi would have, if he would have gone ahead and shook hands with Shehbaz Sharif. So that was not to happen. But then he had some great meetings with the Russians and the Chinese. That's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif after Prime Minister Modi left. Exactly, and that they were there at the military parade as well. So why I'm saying this is, SCO could be a problem. BRICS may be a better forum where you have Russia, India and China, and Pakistan is not in the room. Every time Pakistan is in the room, it becomes a problem for India, Rick.
But I think the thing about SCO, which I was impressed with, was that Erdogan and Fico are literally making moves to go in, which
Yes.
makes it which makes it a real problem for the EU and for NATO.
NATO.
When you have these European leaders who are knocking on the door and saying, "Look, I'm interested in getting a membership to your club. What's it cost to join?" And then they're criticizing their old club. I mean, did you hear the things that Fitzo said about the EU and about the European
Yes.
mindset? That's very deliberative. That's almost a real change in what the politics are of that region. So, um, who do you let in and what do they do and how exclusive do you make the club are questions that they're going to have to come up with. I agree with you. At this point, BRICS is the stronger of all the organizations that bring together the global South community, or as we have changed its name to the global majority community, because that's what it looked like when I was watching this thing unfold and when I was in Beijing and Shanghai.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. The India-Pakistan issue was certainly, like, Trump is very upset that India is not crediting him for the ceasefire, but do you think he can really make a difference when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war? Do you think the red lines will stay for Russia and yet Ukraine will be coming to the talking table to negotiate?
The Russia-Ukraine war is so simple. I mean, the Russians have basically said this thing can be over tomorrow. We'll stop tomorrow. Here's what we want. Here's our cards on the
Right.
table. Ukraine has to be a sovereign, independent, neutral country. It cannot belong to NATO.
Right.
In other words, it can't be run by the Germans or the French and the Americans and the UK. Okay, that's number one. Two, you can't have troops there. You can't have your soldiers in a country that's a buffer for our country, because you could literally shoot a missile into Moscow and kill millions of Muscovites, right? So you can't have troops there, and you got to get all your military hardware out of there. And three, we're going to keep whatever we already got. By the way, those four oblasts that we have, say the Russians, those people, they go to Russian churches, they speak Russian, they live in
Absolutely.
the Russian culture, and they want to be Russian. So that's it. You give us those things, it's over tomorrow. Zelensky doesn't want to agree to any of those things, it seems to me, because if Zelensky agrees to those things, he's out. Mr. Putin is enjoying 85% approval ratings in Russia. Mr. Zelensky barely is getting 42. That means if he does have elections, there's a good chance he's not going to win. If he settles this war, they're also probably not going to be happy with him. And there's some very strong oligarchical types in his country, which most people believe are kind of running his government in many ways. So he's in a bit of a pickle, Mr. Zelensky. I think in many ways it's safe to say Mr. Zelensky is one of the big reasons that this thing can't get settled. And of course, his benefactors, the Europeans, are not wanting him to settle because they want this war to go on indefinitely, because they just despise Russia. They hate Russia. They hate the Russians. They always have, and they always will. And as long as they're concerned, as far as they're concerned, as long as they can keep Russia in a war, they're happy. And I'm not sure that's a very smart play, but they're going to continue that play. That's how it seems to me.
But should they settle with the areas of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea remaining with Russia? Would that mean end game for Zelensky?
I think so. I think if they settle, the good news is the war's over the next day, practically. I'm being facetious, of course, but yeah, we'd be pretty close to it. And it would be bad news for Zelensky. If they don't settle, the Russians are going to keep going, and who knows? Bye-bye Odessa. Bye-bye more areas that are, west of the Dnipro River. I mean, it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. That's why I think Mr. Trump is right to try to push for some kind of finality here, but he can't get his European friends to go along with it. They're fighting him every step of the way. And by the way, so are the American oligarchs, which are the millionaires and billionaires who run the big, weapons manufacturing companies in the United States, who want the war to continue, because every time a plane falls, they get to make another plane. It's that simple.
Right. Rick, explain to us how this really works. We've seen past presidents of the United States of America take a very harsh position when it comes to Russia. But Trump has been different. he's handled things very differently, how he really wanted to engage Russia, especially President Putin. Do you see a future where maybe this president will be able to change the way US engages Russia, how Washington engages Moscow, or will the deep state be at work and ensure that that doesn't happen? Because despite and in spite of that, the two leaders did meet.
I don't know if Mr. Trump's going to be able to do this. Here's my insight. Um, I have a couple of dear friends in the American media. Obviously, Tucker Carlson and I talk a lot. I remember I was talking to Tucker not long ago, and he said something that stayed with me because he knows them both better than I do. Um, he said, JD is really tough, and he gets it. Mr. Trump, not so much.
Hmm.
Um, I think the American vice president has a better plan and a better picture and probably has more stamina and more backbone. He can't display it now because it would be, I guess, wrong of him to do that. And you don't want to backbite your employer. But I think JD uh, and a JD administration would probably be more toward an openness with Russia than obviously a Rubio administration, or even to some regard, this Trump administration. I think he could take it even a bit further. I think Trump tends to succumb to whoever is last in his ear, and the people who are in his ear right now are the neocons, no question. They're the Lindsey Grahams of the world, Lady Lindsey, as we call her. I mean him.
Hmm.
Um, they're the people who are talking to Mr. Trump and telling him what to do, and unfortunately, they're also business people and they talk business sense. And I don't know, my judgment, my take, what I'm seeing develop with Mr. Trump is that despite all his promises to end all the wars, and despite all his promises to be a peacemaker, and despite all his promises to forge a new and different world, it's all been bullcrap. It's the same
Hmm.
world. In fact, in some ways, it's maybe even more dangerous and less friendly.
Wow. Rick, you're really giving me a lot of insight now. I'll have to start really reading Marco Rubio and JD Vance and what they're doing to see what the future holds for not just America but also India US relations, because 50% tariffs, Rick, on India. It is not just normal or not normal, it is absolutely ludicrous to have a country think they can impose 50% tariffs. You can engage, you can have a conversation, but to use tariffs as a weapon, which Trump is doing, what's your reading on that?
My reading is where we started the conversation. It's 50 to Gita, it's 50% today. Tomorrow it could be 30. And the next day it could go down to 15. And then it could go back up to 60 or 65. And here's the problem with that. If you're an economist, and most economists will tell you this, the market feeds off of consistency. And you cannot react to tariffs when they change on a weekly basis. And that's unfortunately why I think the Indian market would be foolish to overreact to this 50%, because they should understand, like China understood, and like Brazil understood, and like the EU to a certain extent even understood, that whatever Mr. Trump says today will be different or changed tomorrow based on whoever compliments him.
Well, succumbing would mean investors would have no confidence in India. Look at China, they didn't succumb. Trump had to back off. Of course, the US needs China more than the US would ever need India, but succumbing is certainly not an option here.
So the question is the market big enough in these countries who were at this summit and the BRICS nations to give India enough so that it could live without Donald Trump? And can India make Donald Trump either realize that or at least believe that enough to go back on his 50% tariffs? That's the game that we're playing right now. In some sense, it's a bluff game. And if you play poker, you understand how that hand is played. And in other ways, it's actually a reality game where India has to say to itself, we cannot sit here and be their lapdog. And every time they say sit, stand, we stand, etc., bark, we bark. No, we have to make this decision. And either it's going to work as a bluff, or B, a reality of the way things are going to be done in the future. But India better be damn sure and ready to move in the direction of the BRICS nations for sure if it makes that threat. And I think that's the play that Mr. Modi is playing right now, and that's the reason he didn't take Mr. Trump's phone calls. My take.
All right, I have to let you go, but before you go, there are two very important points I can't not ask you about, because these are conflicts, and there are conflicts happening everywhere. You mentioned Tucker, and Tucker recently spoke about the Israel-Gaza war, and he also spoke about how Epstein had connections with the Israelis, which nobody is allowed to talk about. How do you see this war and the position? It's a different thing to completely look at Hamas as a terrorist organization, not condone the terror attack, but nobody's talking about the fact that that there is a need to look at the larger picture of the war itself. That in Gaza, there is an entire plan of the Netanyahu administration for a Gaza takeover, and now a takeover of the West Bank.
Well, look, I guess we can't talk about this without talking about the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is that the United States is not the most powerful country in the world. Israel is the most powerful country in the world. And Israel runs the United States. Israel, remember that lapdog I told you about with the Mr. Modi story I said a little while ago? Where, Mr. Modi's trying to tell Mr. Trump, look, we're not your lapdog, and every time you say bark, we're not going to bark, and every time you say sit, we're not going to sit, and every time you say stand, we're not going to stand. Well, when it comes to the United States-Israel relation, Israel says bark, the United States barks. Israel says, stand, and the United States stands, and same with sitting, I guess. And that's the reality. And anybody who tells you differently is lying. If Mr. Netanyahu decides he's going to go to Congress and give a speech, there's nobody in the United States who could tell him no. If Mr. Netanyahu wants a reporter in the United States fired because he doesn't like what he said about him, that reporter will be fired. And I don't care if he works at the New York Times or CNN or Fox News or wherever. The United States literally runs the United States, Israel runs the United States foreign policy. It's as clear as day. It's the reason we invaded Iraq. It's the reason we were in Afghanistan. It's the reason we did what we did in Syria. It's the reason we're doing what we're doing in Yemen. It's the reason we did what we did in Libya. And it's now the reason that we're backing them 100%, what looks like an extermination or a genocide in Gaza. And that's what American people are seeing. And the people who are seeing it most, and this is the problem for Mr. Trump.
Rick, are the people seeing
yes,
it?
Yes, they are. His base is starting to see it. And certainly the good news for people who see that is the independent media that's talking about it. The Judge Napolitanos, the McGregors, the Tucker Carlsons, the Rick Sanchez, the other American journalists who are outside the mainstream and are telling these stories. And they have I have millions of people who follow me. And I was just talking to, I think, my wife the other day, and I said, what's weird, honey? I've got a bigger base now than I did when I was on CNN. How many people watch CNN on a regular day? 25 to 54 key audience is something like 150,000. That's tiny. Tucker Carlson has 5 million people who watch everything he says.
Absolutely.
So in the end, that's kind of what we have to start looking at. And that audience, the MAGA audience, is turning against Mr. Trump because they're saying, you said you were going to be America first. You're not America first. You're Israel first. And that's a problem. And the Epstein, and you're right, Geeta, the Epstein situation underscores that even more, because it goes against transparency, which was the second thing this administration promised it would deliver on. So yeah, your instincts are correct. There's a problem there for the Trump administration on those two counts.
All right. And finally, before I let you go, I'll go back to the first thing we discussed, Rick. That's the Trump post on Truth Social, where he's talking about how India and Russia are moving to the deep, dark China, and he's almost wishing the countries a prosperous future together. But how do you read this? Is this him being a jilted lover, disappointed in India and Russia on that, for that matter? Or is this a threat that he will take action against Russia and India?
Well, if he's trying to play one side against the other, what I would argue is it's too late. That Kissinger doctrine of, what we'll do? We'll separate them. We'll make Russia hate China or make China hate Russia. Pick a side. And that way we'll keep one side for us, and we'll be able to establish dominion over the other. Divide and conquer. It's as old as the hills. That will not work anymore because of what's happened over the last year or so with the tariffs and the sanctions and the other castigatory measures that the United States has used. So the United States is in a position now where if Mr. Trump is trying to play that game and he's trying to say to Russia and India, China's bad, they're evil, et cetera, and stay away from them. I don't think that Mr. Modi or Mr. Putin are going to buy that argument because the relationship that have now been established with China is already too far along the road for them to decide to walk it back. And I don't think that Mr. Trump's comment, which is obviously what this is intended to do, is going to make them do that. Not because it may not be true in some way. If you want to argue that there's something wrong with China, you can. It's fine. Everybody can be criticized, obviously. The problem is it doesn't fit with the narrative that Mr. Trump has been arguing in the past. And it goes back to the question you and I have been talking about throughout this. Mr. Trump's problem, the US government's problem right now, is a lack of consistency of messaging. And a lack of consistency of messaging is hard to make people act. And I think that's the big problem that they have with something like what Mr. Trump said here. And the question is, will he say the same thing tomorrow, or will he come up with a different argument? I'd say a different argument.
Rick Sanchez, thank you so much for speaking with India Today Global. Thank you.